I am an artist living in beautiful Vermont, USA, and I have a lot of questions. So I engage the minds of the people that I meet, poets, writers, artists. I explore what's inside and share it with you. My name is Ricky McGeckran, and I am eager to know. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Eager to Know. I am very excited to have Eddie Carson, who is Dean of Residential Life and Belonging at Vermont Academy, and he is also Baxter's dad,
Absolutely.
Baxter the dog, who I see roaming around my neighborhood. Welcome, Eddie, to Eager to Know.
Oh, brother, I appreciate it. I'm excited to be on the show, and I know Baxter's going to be happy to hear that little shout out to him. His ears going to just pop up the way they always do.
Now, you live in my neighborhood, and I see you walking your dog. Now, you claim that Baxter is barky, but I don't really feel like I've witnessed that. He always seems to be pretty well behaved whenever I see him.
Yeah. Because let me tell you, this is this little Jedi mind trick that Baxter plays on certain folks, and he's got you fooled, my friend, for right now. Just keep listening a little bit, because he does it, especially if there's another dog around, and you can hear him from blocks, miles away. I'm stunned you don't even hear him from on the top of the hill from campus. So.
All right. Well, belonging. Let's talk about the concept of belonging. When I saw that was part of your title and responsibility, that intrigued me. And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and so a couple things, and not to be long-winded. You know, first I'll start off, it means really finding ways in where people can make a space their space.
Okay.
Right? And that is the fact that they're not outsiders in terms of environments, regardless of your race, your gender, your class status, your social, economic status, sexual orientation, all of those things. That means that you can enter a space and you don't feel a sense of hostility that this is not your home, this is not your place, but you're welcome. For whatever identity you bring to the fold, it is your space.
Okay.
That is what it means to me.
Okay. And you are the Dean of
Residential Life.
Residential Life. So that you work at Vermont Academy, which is a boarding school. So you have students from all over the country, all over the world that are living there.
Absolutely.
So this sense of belonging is more than just words, because you are responsible or highly influencing where they live and how they live.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about folks who are traveling from a long way away and being away from home, particularly for the fact that, I mean, we have students as young as 14 and as old as 19, 20. And so there's a range of students there, and folks who are leaving home early on, being away from family and everything too, who want to find a space in which they can call home. I mean, you're talking about where they study, the dining hall, where they eat, where they engage in programs and activities, where they hang out with their friends, where they build relationships in a social capacity, because we know school is more than just the academic aspect of it, though that is a big part of it.
Yeah, even if you're not, I mean, I didn't go to a boarding school, but, you know, when I think of high school, the last thing I think about is calculus and chemistry. I think about the interactions and how I felt around everybody in high school. So what can you do as a administrator or dean to influence this, how people are feeling safe? Tell me about that.
Yeah, you know, there are a number of things. So I'll give you an example. So last week, we celebrate Pride Month in October, since that's when a lot of folks are there on campus.
Okay.
I brought in a noted speaker who talked about what it meant in terms of his intersectionality to be a black man, to be a black gay man, to be a black gay man who also attended a boarding school before he went on to Harvard, and to talk about how he wrestled at times with his own identity, hiding in that proverbial closet because of that sense of masculinity, that he couldn't step forward and say, this is who I am. And so he used that masculinity as a shield that at points in times he felt was toxic. And yet he arrived at a point where he told our students to be yourself, to be your best straight self, your best gay self, to really celebrate and to engage and embrace the nuances of other people. And by having programs like that, it does allow students to say, okay, right? These are the values of this place. Now, I got Brother Carson. I got all these other folks, and they want me to be me. I don't have to pretend or to be someone else just to fit in. And I think that's the key there. Not perfect. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So bringing in speakers,
finding places for students to engage, to have conversations, to get to know each other.
So tell me about that. When you talk about finding spaces for that, what can you give me specifics on what you would do?
Yep. So I'll give you one. So we're going to have a dinner and set up a fishbowl forum in a week to talk about the upcoming political election.
Okay.
And we're going to look to model this in a sense that we may disagree, and there are things that, you know what, we probably should disagree on, but yet we still have to live beside our neighbors.
Now, one of the things that you had mentioned when we did our pre-interview is you see yourself as an observer. So tell me, what does it mean to be an observer to you?
Anytime I walk into a space, one of the things that I want to know and one of the things I want to get a sense of is who are the people in that space, right? How do they say hello? How do they greet me? How do they behave? How do they navigate? How do they move within that space? Am I safe in that space? Do I feel comfortable? Particularly for me, I mean, I'm a black man in rural Vermont, and folks have been great, but there's a reality that comes along with that, and that is oftentimes I'm the only one who looks like me in a space, right? And so when I walk in, the things that I pay attention to always and notice is, how do people say hello to me, right? Do they greet me? Is it authentic or not? Or to as much as I can tell if it's authentic. How do they feel about the space that they're in? And is that space a shared space for someone like me who may have a different identity than they have? That is important. And it's also about other things too, such as I observe language people use, and not in a judgmental way. That's not my job. But, I listen to how people respect and respond to people based off the language they use, recognizing the fact that people operate in different identities, especially when it comes to gender, right? Do folks understand those things? I'm someone who delves in and spend a lot of time within the transgender community and in the gender non-binary community. So listening to that has really taught me quite a bit too. I'd say the other thing when it comes to being an observer is the fact that someone going to help me out if I seem confused, if I seem lost as a stranger. I had a hard time finding a studio. I was asking someone how do I find this space when I got here. A man behind me knew exactly where to go and told me how to get here, right, just to be helpful.
Okay. Now, have you always been saw yourself as an observer, like even as a kid, or tell me about that?
Always, and it's been that way for a long time.
And where did you grow up?
I'm from Montgomery, Alabama.
Alabama.
Absolutely. Right. And and a lot of that goes back to the fact that I watched and paid close attention to my parents and how they engaged with each other and how they treated me. Yeah. Same with my teachers, my coaches, and other folks too. And a lot of that stuff, I'm blessed in a way to have a sharp mind and a strong memory. Yeah. And those things have shaped me. Even the folks that, I'd love to emulate. Yeah. My job, beyond my day job, but my job is quite ubiquitous. It extends beyond clocking in and clocking out. All right. It is what I do all the time and frequently. I'm an activist. I build relationships. I organize. I bring folks together in a particular way, especially if there's an injustice that's taking place. And in order for me to do that, being able to really kind of engage, to talk to folks about, hey, how do we solve this problem, right? And the problems I'm interested in solving are the societal problems where people are not being treated fairly.
Okay.
That's it. That's my number one job in life.
Your number one job.
My number one job in life.
And when did that become your number one job in life?
I mean, that's a great question. There have been times where I've leaned into that space when I was in high school thinking about this. There have been times, just to be honest, where I had to step back from my own soul because it was wearing me down. And there's some folks even today, my wife would probably say that at times I need to step back from my own soul because the clock never stops and the mind always races.
Now, one of the things that you had mentioned also was connecting through differences.
Yes.
And I was thinking, in prepping for this interview, I was really thinking about that. And because I think I may have a different viewpoint on just how I work in the world. Tell me about what that means to you.
So for me, in terms of the activist work and the things that I engage in, I want folks to make sure that, we may look different. Our backgrounds may be different. We may love differently. We may view the world in different ways. All of those things are there, but yet I do believe there's shared commonality that exists. And that shared commonality really falls at the fact that, how do we talk to each other, right? I am a big, big believer in having a conversation with someone, even if those differences are there.
Okay.
Because I found at times, even if you talk to someone, you can bring them, you can find a way to find some middle ground. Okay. We're at least willing to listen to each other.
That's how I view things. I think I maybe misinterpreted the connecting through difference phrase, because I connect through commonality. That's I use that as the gateway to connect with anyone. I can always find something in common with anyone if I spend enough time with them. It's never failed me. So regardless of whether they seem completely different from me, it's only a matter of time where I'm going to be able to find a gateway into them through something in common.
Yeah, and that requires, though, a lot of effort and a lot of energy, too.
And a lot of curiosity.
Right. No, I agree. Absolutely.
Curiosity.
Right? I mean, where folks kind of come together from different ends and everything, too, and they frame that topic. One of the things that I like to do, and I always tell folks being Southern and everything, is I like to break bread. All right, my favorite piece of furniture in my house is my dining room table, right? That's that space where you get together, you open that bottle of wine, right? We invite folks over and we break bread and we talk about the things we need to talk about, particularly in terms of what does it mean to build relationships, that capacity to build relationships. And, for me, as someone who sees myself as a leader of people, if I can't build those relationships with folks, then I'm ineffective in a lot of things that I'm trying to do, whether it's at Vermont Academy, whether it's, off campus, all those places. One of the things that I am always conscientious about is how do I build relationships with folks, because you don't know when you're going to need those folks, and not to use them, but in a way to really resolve problems that may exist.
When you look at the capacity to build relationships, that is such a key, I wouldn't call it a skill, but when you look at working with students, is that something you can explicitly teach? Is it something that you model? How does that work?
You have to. Yeah, no, you're spot on. You have to model that. You can't teach that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I can lecture, I can give readings, but yet what I've tried to do is I like to tell stories. Let me tell you about so-and-so, right? Or this moment happened here or there. And I do it in a way, whether it's with colleagues, whether it's my wife or Baxter, I want them to see that everything we do is about relationship building, but not always, right? Because you're seeking to get something out of it.
Are there any specific behaviors that you would exhibit if you were trying to model relationship building skills?
I mean, for me, it's some things I've had to learn, such as focus on listening. And I think listening is the most powerful skill possible. Instead of looking to talk or thinking about what you want to do, I have focused a lot on just sitting back and saying nothing and listening.
Have you ever read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Are you familiar with that book?
That's by Stephen Covey.
Stephen Covey, yeah.
Yes, probably about 20 years ago.
Yeah. One of his habits is seek first to understand, then be understood, which is really all about listening and paying attention. And I And so I wish that I wish I had known that when I was like your student's age.
Oh, me too.
As opposed to yapping about myself, I wish I had been a better listener, because I think it is the foundation of all good relationships.
No, I
Genuinely,
agree.
not doing it as a trick, but actually,
and it is one of those things. And like I said, I'm not 100% perfect at it,
course not,
right?
yeah.
My wife, my partner will say, did you not hear me when I was sharing this stuff? It depends on what we're talking about again, but yeah.
So when we think about the concept of belonging and everything that means, how do you think geography, and I guess we can restrict this to geography in the U.S., I suppose, unless you don't want to.
Oh,
how do you think that affects this idea of belonging in 2024?
Right. I mean, I'm going to go even a little bit before 2024, but not too far before that. So I'm Southern. My wife's Southern. She's from Arkansas. I'm from Alabama. We lived in Arkansas and in Texas. So we spent most of our life down in the South. And one of the things that we were wrestling with before we moved up to Massachusetts, first into Vermont, is the fact that, how are people going to welcome us, and how are they going to see us because of geography? Are they going to hear that Southern twang that she has, or the accents that we bring forth as we're navigating through these spaces, or are they going to see us as outsiders, right? People have particular perceptions and images of different places, especially if they don't know people from those places.
And you were moving to where in Massachusetts?
So I was moving up to. So first I was at a institution in North Andover.
Okay, so Boston
Yeah,
area.
just north of the Boston area in Massachusetts, about 40 miles north, right? And so, we always thought about small things and how it would be welcome coming to a different place. We always thought about geography in a sense that, do people stick to folks they know, family? Are they willing to go outside of their comfort zone to say hello to people like us? This past weekend, I went to a food and music festival, and I'm going to butcher the name of the town. It starts with
Ascutney?
Ascutney, thank you. And it was wonderful, particularly because I sat there and I listened to the bands, the bluegrass bands. I looked at all the folks out there who didn't look like me, and I sat there and I wondered, what's their perception of me being in a space, particularly a white space like Vermont? Do they even think about that? Because this is where geography matters. Do they wonder, is this my home? Or am I from somewhere else? Am I visiting? And I've engaged with people in wonderful conversations who will ask me those questions. Not so much the question of, in a negative way, where are you from? Like you don't belong. But they'll ask it to me in a way that, hey, what do you think of the show? Right? I'm just kind of over in this area right here. How about yourself? And we'll engage in a nice conversation. Had 3 of those this past weekend. And I'm sure some of it was out of curiosity, because there's always curiosity. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, how do we take that curiosity a step further in building that capacity for relationship in a geographical sense? I'm not from here. And most people probably know that. Okay. And that's okay.
Okay. Are you feeling like you belong?
Folks have treated me well. I've walked Baxter at night. I've come across people. I've gotten into some great conversations. I met this wonderful couple right there in Saxon's River named Jeff and Ann. And you may or may not know them.
They are they're my neighbors and former eager to know guests. So, and friends.
Oh, they were just so wonderful the way.
Well, they're Southerners too.
You're right. I was going to bring that up too, because they shared that with me. Yeah. They had folks there, and then they were giving me kind of the information, the background on the area and everything too. I felt really, really, really good so far. And for me, just a walk around, which I do frequently at night. I don't do that in places I don't feel comfortable or safe in.
Okay. All right.
Not at all.
All right. Well, this has been fantastic having you on here. I am very grateful to have you as a neighbor and living in our village and being part of our community. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This was a great conversation.
Rick, I appreciate it, and I'll make sure Baxter barks nice and loud and proud when we cruise by your hood again. Right. We will do that.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
All right.
My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.